Share that. No, not yet. Good evening. I'll give everyone a minute to find their seats before we get started. I want to welcome everyone here tonight. Looks like we have a good turnout, a good crowd. And we have tried to have Urban Renewal Agency members spread around the room. So you might have one at your table to answer questions. My name is Perry Roberts and I am on the URA board. And I'd like to just take a minute and introduce some of the folks that are going to be speaking tonight. And I just want to start out with a shout out to the Elks Club. There is a political presentation tonight, which starts at 7 p.m. So we're going to try to wrap up. So if anybody wants to go attend that, they're able to do that. But there's kind of a little conflict. We were both scheduled for the same time, and they agreed to delay their start so that we would not be trying to divide up the community. So tonight, we are going to show you the presentation that was put together by Kansas State University Technical Assistance to Brownfields, which we call KSU TAB because you don't have to say all those other words. And that will be led by Kate Lucas. And she also has Leslie Vanelli here, who is going to be assisting her. And then also here tonight, we have Myrna Lestusky and Nan Knight from Beartooth RC&D. We have Jeremy Fadness, who will be presenting after I finish from WWC Engineering. And Jeremy is our contract planner for the city. We also have Court Walsh and Jason Saylor from Montana Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ. And I think that's one of their slides right up there on the screen. And Jason will just put up a slide here in a moment to explain what brownfields are. And the second half of tonight's meeting is going to be split into two things. One, we're going to talk about the North Community entrance. And then the second part, we're going to discuss the area where Rocky Fork Inn formerly was located and talk about what our options are in that area. So we'll take a 10-minute break after, between the two, just to give you all a break and take any questions that are necessary. So on that note, I'm going to invite Jason to, that's right, Jeremy's going to go first. I'm sorry. And Jeremy's going to talk about what an urban renewal district is. And we'll get started with that. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. A lot of people here tonight, so that's great. Jeremy Fadness, WWC Engineering. I'm the contract planner for the city of Red Lodge. Been helping the city with planning services for 2 years now. Been really happy to help with the stuff that I've helped with. Basically tonight, I just want to kind of talk about the role of the Urban Renewal Agency and the city of Red Lodge with this development process. So the first thing I want to say is that the Urban Renewal Agency and the city of Red Lodge are not developers. So this is purely a planning study that talks about what can be done with these properties. if a developer were to say come and be interested in doing something on these parcels. The city's responsibility really in this process is to help facilitate development by regulations, right? So that might be zoning regulation updates to help with development, and that sort of thing. And then the URA, using tax increment financing, has a fund that is used to assist developers, potentially with infrastructure development. So if a developer were to come in and say, you know, we really like the plan for one of these parcels, they could apply to the URA. There's an application, they fill it out, provide all the part information, and then the URA and the city council would review that and make a decision on whether or not to fund infrastructure. So that would be water, sewer, streets, sidewalks, things of that nature. So I just wanna, that's why I'm kind of starting this off, was to kind of talk about that, the role of the URA in the city of Red Lodge. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jason to talk about the Brownsfield stuff.
Thanks, Jeremy. Clicker, stay there. You. Okay. Hello, my name is Jason Seiler. I'm one of the Montana DQ's Brownfields coordinators, and today the reason why we're bringing up Brownfields is Brownfields is kind of the gateway into a lot of different assistance programs. And so first we're going to start off with talking about Brownfields, and then because we had a couple of brownfields in the northern area, the Peak Cannery being the big one, that got us access to KSU TAB. And so we were able to bring in KSU TAB and Kate and Blaze and Maggie, and they were able to do a lot of great things thinking about that area. And then we're going to switch topics to kind of the south end and Rocky Fork and that's another brownfield site that we've worked on. And so then we're going to work on and use KSU while we have them here. We're going to kind of take advantage of them on that site as well. So, but to start off, not everybody probably knows what a brownfields is. And so I thought we would do that. And I am one of 3 brownfields coordinators. We also have Court Walsh here as well. She's also with me in the Helena office. And we're here to kind of answer any questions about brownfields that you may have. So when we start off, we usually start off with
other button. You're going.
There
it is. Yeah.
We usually start off with a Camaro. And you know, a lot of you might be like, oh, what does a Camaro have to do with brownfields or any of this? And so just stay with me. We will get the metaphor soon. So imagine you've always wanted a vintage hot rod Camaro in the back, and you've always wanted a dream car, and yet you're driving down the street, and all of a sudden you see out of the corner of your eye, you see something like this, and you just pull around, you pull up to it, and you're like, that's not a Camaro. You're like, well, that's actually a Mercury Cyclone GT. It's the right vintage. Let's go in all by itself. It's the right vintage, and it's $2,500. Who's willing to write a check right out, sight unseen, or just this view alone? Probably not many people are going to want to write a check for $2,500 just looking at it like that. What are you going to do? You're going to start, at least you're going to walk around the site or walk around the car. You're like, hubcap's missing right there, and the hood's not original. And $2,500, maybe not the best decision, but what you would really want to do is ideally you would open up the hood, see what it is. Is it the one on the left? It's the one on the left. Well, yeah, that's $2,500. That sounds like a good deal. Or is it the one on the right? I'm like, ooh, hard pass, right? Well, the same for this, for this Cyclone, the same thing goes for the property that it's actually sitting on. This obviously is an old gas station. And unfortunately, there's no real way to lift up the hood and see what's inside. There's no way to take this for a test drive. The idea behind brownfields is we come in on properties where there's contamination or the perception of contamination. and do an investigation. We put in borings, we kind of we look for asbestos inside the building. We look for petroleum on on the soils. We do the whole investigation, and in the end, you kind of get a bill of health for that property, so you can make an informed decision on whether or not you should move forward in developing this property. And in this case, this is in Livingston, right on Park, as you come into town. It had sat vacant for a number of years, and the reason why is because everybody in the community just knew that it was contaminated. Like, oh yeah, they've been dumping diesel out of the back for years. We went in, did an investigation, we didn't find anything. Everything was clear. We wrote a letter saying that, they gave it a clean bill of health. And within a couple of months, it sold and is now a real estate office, the Yellowstone Real Estate Corporation. Completely got rid of the canopies, completely kind of gave the whole, not only did it increase jobs, increase tax base, but it also kind of gave the neighborhood a facelift. And you kind of, you know, like, now things are happening in this community, and it's kind of whether, a lot of times you're like, what are your gateways showing about your community? Is it a thriving community or is it a declining community? And it's a lot of times for tourists and visitors, that if they saw, it's like, is this a happening community or not? Whereas if you see that, then, oh yeah, this is something, let's check this out. It kind of gives you a good vibe for the community. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what a brownfields is. Brownfields, it is a EPA funded program. This is the definition. It's essentially, it's any property where whether there's the presence or even the perception of presence. Everybody knew that gas station in Livingston was contaminated, except that it was just a perception that it was contaminated. It wasn't really contaminated. This, it's either the perception or the actual contamination. And so in here you have, kind of hard to see, but you have a brown field. And so is that a Browns field or not, or brownfields? So that's actually a refining company, a refining site up in Shelby. The city of Shelby actually acquired that as an old refinery. They purchased it, used brownfields funding. Now it's part of their intermodal rail hub site. The one in the middle, it looks pretty green. But is it a brownfield? Well, it is. This is in Lewistown. It's the Brewery Flats site up in Lewistown now. It used to be a roundhouse rail yard. And as well as a hoarding, someone's hoarding collection of drums and everything else. We were able to get that cleaned up. And now it's a nature park for the community. And then this is, brownfields can actually be buildings as well. It's the asbestos that everybody was worried about here. This is the old Holy Rosary Hospital in Miles City. And it is now a senior living center. So essentially, brownfields are redevelopment opportunities. You don't have to worry about the big definition. It's a redevelopment opportunity where we can come in and help with that redevelopment. And later on, we're going to talk about the redevelopment of the site that happened to be here at Red Lodge. So that's the short version of brownfields. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kate, who's going to talk more about the urban renewal.
Thank you. Okay, quick show of hands. Who here came to this community meeting just for the purpose of hearing about the North Community Entrance Urban Renewal District? Okay, and then how many of you came more for the Rocky Fork stuff? Okay, and then the rest of you, I assume, either don't know why you're here or you're equally interested in both. Okay, very enthusiastic. You know why you're here. Okay. So we can switch to the green presentation.
Working on.
Oh, you're working on it. Okay, thank you. Well, that's okay because you will see on your tables, there's an assortment of papers here, and we're going to add one more during the break. So there's a little piece of paper that explains what the URA does and the purpose of the URD. There's also a sign-in sheet. So if you have not yet signed in, there's a sign-in sheet on every table. So if you'll just at least put your name on there. You don't need to include your email or phone number if you don't want to. Okay, perfect. And then, let's see, we've got agendas for today. We'll try to stick to that. And then we have some other fun materials that I will explain their purpose later. Okay. Oh,
I advanced, my bad.
ah, okay. So Jason and Perry gave us a little bit of an introduction, but I'm with the Technical Assistance to Brownfields program at Kansas State University. A lot of people are like, well, we're in Montana, what is Kansas doing here? And we're here because we're an EPA funded grantee. We provide all of these services to communities for free, and we provide them in 21 states across the country. It's kind of hard to see the color gradations here, but it's basically all the states between Ohio and Utah. I personally live in Colorado, so I'm at least a little bit closer. But yeah, we do this all over the country. Okay. And we were introduced to Red Lodge by Nan and Myrna over at Beartooth. They're here today and will be helping facilitate some of our conversations. Okay, and Jason just did a great presentation on what brownfields are. So I'm gonna skip over this since we're a little short on time. And then here, like you have on your tables, this is the outline of the North Community Entrance Urban Renewal District. We love our acronyms in brownfields. So we've been calling this the NCE URD just to be a little bit easier to say. It's 168 acres. A lot of it includes like the school, the Yellowstone Wildlife Sanctuary, and some park areas. Those we didn't really consider in our work. We really focused on that Broadway corridor that is the entrance into Red Lodge, because of what we heard from the URA and as well as the community members, that it is not representative of who you are as a community. And that is not what you want everyone's first impression of Red Lodge to be. So we were asked to come down to Red Lodge to conduct community engagement and reuse visioning, and to help you develop some ideas of what this area could look like. It's been this way for a very long time, and it can be hard to really visualize what the future could look like without some concrete examples. So that's what we were here to do, and to make sure that those concrete examples were at least somewhat reflective of what the community was looking for. So this is our scope of work. I'll go through each of these items here. Sorry. Okay, so the first thing we did was issue an online survey. And this was what we called the baseline survey. And we were looking to just get a feel for what you all thought of this area, how often you visited it, what you visited it for, and how you thought it could maybe be improved. So we have a couple word clouds here that I thought were really interesting and compelling. So we asked respondents to describe how they currently perceive the URD. And you see here, underutilized, ugly, unattractive, hodgepodge. Hodgepodge was a word we heard a lot, and I love that. And then, we also asked respondents to say what they wanted this area to look like in the future. And what we heard was housing, inviting, welcoming, friendly, walkable, community, downtown. And not a lot of those words were reflected in the kind of current perceptions of the area. So that gave us an idea of, how the community views this area. We then came to Red Lodge. It was May 28th, so just about a year ago, 11 months ago. And we did a number of different exercises to just gauge the community's feelings towards the URD, and then also to start envisioning what that could look like in the future that you desired. Again, felt like the URD doesn't currently represent Red Lodge's character and heritage. And as kind of the primary result of that meeting, we identified 5 high-level priority categories. So here you can see, in short, making it a welcoming and attractive entrance, increasing green space, providing mixed-use development, increasing multimodal connectivity, and then improving the development process and planning to help facilitate development. During that trip, we had 2 other meetings. We had kind of more informal community chats, one in the morning, the day after the evening meeting, and then one that next afternoon as well. We also met with a number of students from Red Lodge High School. who were very impressive and engaged, and we did a very fun, collaging activity. And got input from those students. And that's something I like to do in any community that I visit, because your students of today, I think a lot of times they just don't have either the opportunity, they don't think that they're just less likely to attend a meeting like this. But they're still really valuable residents of your community, and they are the future of your community. And so many kids that I have talked to in these contexts plan to go away for college and to work for a few years, but they also plan to come back. And their priorities for Red Lodge are, as important as everyone else's. So as a result of that meeting, we added a final priority, which was to create welcoming places for community youth to gather and recreate. Okay, and then as a final way to follow up with community members who weren't able to attend any of the in-person meetings, we also issued an online survey that basically asked a lot of the same questions. Just asked respondents to describe what they wanted to see of this area in the future. And it was really very consistent with the feedback that we had gotten in person, which was really affirming. Yeah, and really just heard a lot of the same stuff. So overall, our takeaways were that residents wanted to improve aesthetics in the URD, improve connectivity, and to provide opportunities for landscape recreation, and then affordable/workforce housing. And again, you guys were all like pretty consistent about what you wanted this area, how you wanted this area to feel, if not exactly how you wanted it to look. But even again, with the look, people were pretty well in agreement. Okay. We also conducted a brownfield inventory, and as Jason explained, these are just properties where there's a potential presence for contamination. So something as simple as a historic building that is possibly contains asbestos or lead paint would qualify a property for brownfield resources. It's not a punitive program, it's a collaborative program that allows you to access resources that are focused on economic development. This is not like a punitive environmental program where we're coming in and forcing you to clean up. We're encouraging you to clean up so that you can reposition your property for future uses. We also created a site prioritization worksheet just to help, based on the URA's priorities and what we heard from the community, help identify some of these projects that would be maybe more low-hanging fruit that could be addressed and would help build some momentum. Okay, so in addition to some pretty exhaustive community engagement, don't raise your hand if you had survey fatigue. We also did a few renderings. This was done by one of my colleagues, so I did not actually work on these. I'm going to do my best to convey the meaning here. Based on the feedback we got from the community and the URA, we decided to focus on two priority areas, and it's kind of hard to see here. That's a little weak. We have this little P-shaped parcel, well, that Q, I guess, Q-shaped parcel here. And this one here in green were the ones where we focused our reuse visioning efforts. So we are calling those the north site, and then we have the south site. And one thing that's kind of just a general good thing to note for any sort of planning exercise, you have this trifecta of priorities or kind of constraints on your property. One of those is density, one of those is circulation and parking, and one is civic space. And so you're trying to balance all of those to make an inviting and welcoming place. If you have just a plain old parking lot, that has value, but that's not really a place that you want to hang out unless you're maybe a high school student with some beer. So you're trying to find a balance between all of these to create a welcoming and inviting place. Here's just a few placemaking strategies. And then we get into some reuse renderings for these sites. So this is the south site. It's a vacant lot, pretty much more or less vacant lot just north of the fire station. These are some character images. A lot of these are a little bit higher density than would be, I think, recommended in Red Lodge, but just the overall character kind of drawn from those natural materials, looking at the Beartooth Mountains and considering that viewshed. doing some alley loaded townhomes. Because again, this is right off of Broadway. It's a heavily trafficked street. It's not necessarily the best place for single family homes where you have kids playing in the yards. You want something that's a little higher density, that's a little bit more, less, a little bit more, transition between more commercial and single family areas. So here you guys saw those character images. These are, kind of the proposed site plan. And then so you've got on the left there, the aerial view, and then over here we have kind of a 3D, so you can kind of see there 2 or 3 stories. There's about 8 of them. Here we have, and so these ones were detached garages, so you have just the units kind of fronting onto Broadway with detached garages behind. This here is a double loaded one where you've got an alley with tuck under parking, so a little bit higher density. So just 2 options for that site, and then we have, I think, 3 or 4 options for the north priority area. So here, just a few images of the current uses. I believe this concrete batch plant is in the process of going away. So things have already changed here a little bit since we were last there. Something to note, generally, the street network is a little bit fragmented. It can make it hard to walk between different areas. And so our team is proposing creating a few more intersections with some pedestrian improvements so you can cross Broadway and to help just break up the area. Smaller blocks improve walkability, which is very important. And then we have an overall design strategy. So like I just mentioned, placing mixed-use buildings on Broadway where they're a little higher density, they're not the single-family homes where kids are going to be playing in the front yards. You don't want those fronting right onto Broadway necessarily in this area. So encouraging more commercial and mixed use on the actual Broadway frontage with housing behind. And then also hiding parking, because that again is not conducive to effective placemaking. And then we also heard a lot about open space, and so creating kind of permeability. Permeability is a big planning word. But just being able to make connections between Broadway, the corridor, and then this great park that's tucked away right behind some pretty unattractive uses. And then also making sure that it becomes a place that is comfortable for pedestrians to walk into, because we have a great walkable town. But it is a little uncomfortable to walk along Broadway as it stands currently. So a few character images, again, a little maybe higher density, but just kind of mixed use and reflective of kind of that mountain town character. Oh, more character images. Some character images for kind of parks and green space. Okay, and then we get into concept plans. Okay, I got 3 minutes. So here, this is I believe the lowest density option that we looked at. So you can see along Broadway, we've got a couple crosswalks, which would be great for crossing the street safely. It says 3-story. I don't know that that would work with current zoning. It's 2 or 3-story, but proposing maybe a ground floor retail, office space, and then maybe a level or 2 of residential above on either side of Broadway. A little bit of surface parking. Over here on the east side, we have, again, those townhomes, and then some townhomes over here on the west side as well. This is just a summary. Okay, so this is Broadway Park. We had some very similar looking sounding names. So again, on this side of Broadway, on the east side, maintaining that mixed use. So resident or retail on the ground floor, commercial on the ground floor, residential above. Again, we have the townhomes, a little bit lower density over here on the far east side. And then you have a park along Broadway, which was something that we heard, a lot of desire for, with a little greenway over to park area over here, as well as on the west side. So you've got a setback and then a slightly larger apartment building, 2 to 3 stories with some surface parking behind. And again, more kind of planning documents. Okay, and then this here, I think, is the highest density option. So pretty much all 2 to 3 story mixed use buildings with some townhomes back here on the east. surface parking, and then some, tree and landscape improvements along Broadway. Okay, this is a quick summary and comparison of all of the different options. And again, these are all options. What we heard from you all when we were here was housing is a critical need in this community. And so a lot of our concept plans focused on housing. We also heard that there was, you guys have a really great thriving downtown. There were concerns that potential retail or commercial improvements in this area would maybe be a conflict with those spaces. And the intent is not to, anger any downtown business owners, but to provide more options. One thing we heard from the students is there's not really a walkable, quick lunch option for them. It sounds like a lot of them are eating at the gas station very often, which probably is fine for a high school student, but as a non-high school student hearing that, you're like, I would love for you to eat some vegetables. So, which I haven't been, maybe they have vegetables at the town pump, is that what it's called? Yeah, okay, maybe they have vegetables, I don't know. Anyways, it's good to have more options, and currently, we want these kids to be able to get what they need, and to feel served in their part of town as well. Okay, more summary. I know I'm going through this very quickly. I'm happy to look at these in more detail if anyone, if you have questions. And I believe these slides, I don't know if they'll be posted, but okay. The mayor is recording this. So yes, the recording will be available online.
And the slides separately.
And the slides separately. Okay, perfect. Okay, and then we have the final step that we did was a resource roadmap. This is a document that identifies different sources of funding that can be used for the improvements. We know, Red Lodge does not have a high population. Montana does not have super high taxes. Your town is, constrained. They have other things that they need to provide. And so there's not a ton of money left over for other development and improvements. So where you can fill that gap is grant funding and loans. That can be, sourced from all different sorts of so we identified nonprofit, philanthropic funding, as well as state and federal government grant funding and loan programs that can be used, and technical assistance programs that can be used to really implement the vision that we heard from you all. Okay, only 2 minutes behind. I feel pretty good about that. So we're gonna break, I think, for about, let's say, until 6:12. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you want to just come up and ask them. Oh, and Joanne would like everyone to eat more food.
Especially vegetables.
Especially vegetables. It is 6:12. So for this next portion of the meeting, we're gonna have another quick presentation from Jason Seiler and Jeremy. They're gonna talk briefly about what is, sorry, gotta be on screen. What is permissible to build on the Rocky Fork site. But before I do that, number one, I've been asked to just remind you all that the slides will be available online for your, additional review in the next couple of days, probably. Okay. And then the other thing is that there's a couple tables. We're going to be doing this exercise on a table by table basis. There's a couple tables where there's just a couple people. So if you want to stay there, that's totally fine. If you want to combine, also fine. It's kind of whatever you, however friendly you feel like being, is just fine. So, I will, if you'll swap it back.
Where we going now?
We're doing FEMA, number 3, yeah. And then there's better for that.
You want to click through?
Maybe, but it was.
All right, sounds good. Okay, well, again, my name is Jason Seiler. I'm one of the members of the Montana DEQ Brownfields team, and again, doing business with the WWCP, and we're gonna here today talking about what the Rocky Fork Inn and how it worked with the FEMA side of things. Again, we already touched it based on this, redevelopment opportunities, member of the Camaro, and how does this fit in with the Rocky Fork? And so when the city was acquiring this property, um. This is how it fits together. So everybody knows that the historic flooding severely damaged the Rocky Fork Inn. And FEMA came in and did an assessment on the structure, is not structurally sound. But before the city could actually make that purchase, before they bought that Camaro, they would want to know what they were getting into. And we actually came in and did assess a hazardous building materials assessment on the property. Cause, I mean, there was a lot of stuff in there, but the biggest concern is there a lot of asbestos? Is there not a lot of asbestos? How much is this gonna cost? Because you have to abate all of that before you can get it out of the door. And the city rightfully so wanted to take kind of a measured approach and wanted to make sure they were doing all the right things. And so we came in, we did an assessment and said, and actually didn't find that much. And so that was a good thing. And so, we came in, did the assessment, state came in and used our funds on that. Right before the city purchased the property, Beartooth RCMD came in, or with their money, performed kind of a paperwork due diligence, and got a phase 1 ESA, right before the city acquired it. That made the city eligible to continue with brownfields assistance, as well as kind of set them up nicely for the FEMA side of things. Anything else? Okay.
You could say what ESA is.
An ESA, Environmental Site Assessment. Good question. So as you can see up here, these are kind of the things that we found. That's asbestos floor tiles. This is part of the roof that had the asbestos felt in it. It was just a portion of it, not the entire thing. And then other kind of basic household things like mercury thermostats.
Yeah, so, in kind of at the same time all that was going on, there was a disaster declaration for the flooding, right? As part of that disaster declaration at the federal level, 10% of those funds go to hazard mitigation. So instead of direct assistance, to the community to clean up that flood, damage, it's earmarked for, basically trying to prevent that hazard in the future, okay? So based on that, what the city did was they applied to Montana DES for hazard mitigation grant funds, that's HMGP. And for the purchase and the cleanup of the Rocky Fork. So that's the funding source, and then there's a 75% FEMA portion and then 25% local match. At that time, the state actually had a state fund that went through the legislature called state resiliency funds. That the state was actually able to come in and pay the 25% match for the city. And that covered 100% cost of purchasing property, and then the demolition and cleanup of the site along with the Brownsfields funds.
Right, and then
So it's kind of so there was basically 3 funding sources essentially that went into making this project happen.
so we were able to go in, abate all of that, and then allow the FEMA funds to be used for the demolition. And that's a picture of when it was coming down after everything had been abated. Probably coming down.
So, the last kind of piece that's going through right now is, the city's contract engineer is working on a bank stabilization project to stabilize the bank along the creek. That is currently in design. I believe they had a meeting last week, kind of a public meeting to talk about that, but that is planned to be completed this fall.
Or maybe spring
or
because of
spring.
willows.
Right. Or spring, that time frame when the water's lowest, they usually like to do those projects in the fall and the spring before high water. But with that project will essentially be complete once the bank stabilization project is done.
And then where brownfields comes in, because we spent brownfields on the assessment and the cleanup, that means the site is kind of in perpetually eligible to continue to receive brownfields assistance, and so that's why we're here today. So now gets the fun part, is we get to talk about what's the plan for the future, what's the redevelopment, how can we make it into that sweet hot rod? And so, yeah, so with that.
So yeah, with the purchase of the property with FEMA funds, right, there are restrictions. Because this is, was previously damaged by flood. And this is an effort to clean up essentially the floodplain. There are restrictions that are perpetual on that property, that we have to keep in mind. The FEMA allows basically parks, open space, and wetlands restoration for those properties. Recreational uses are allowed as part of the parks and open space portion, so that could be trails, ball fields. Minimal infrastructure is the idea, right? No permanent, large structures, are really allowed. You can put in, gazebos, picnic shelters that don't have sides, like that sort of thing, so that if the site does flood, that flood water can flow through. The exception to that is restrooms. They do allow public restrooms to be put in.
Have walls.
But yeah, they have, obviously restrooms have walls, they're not gonna be open sided restrooms, that would be awkward for everybody. But yeah, there are some requirements for those structures, you can see at the bottom, any structure has to be elevated, there's a base, that 100-year flood elevation that's set by FEMA. Any structures have to be elevated 3 feet above that floodplain, or the structure has to be flood proofed 3 feet above that elevation. And so for a public restroom, that might mean we have to build up a mound for that restroom to get it above the floodplain. Or that sort of thing, any electrical equipment has to be 3 feet above that flood elevation, that sort of thing. So I think this just leads into this discussion, this you're gonna do now is we're kind of limited with what we can do on the property because of FEMA restrictions. So that's, what Kate's presented to you here to put on the site kind of fits with what we're kind of allowed to do. So, and then with that, I will also mention, there is no funding from FEMA or anybody else to do this work, so this is just a planning exercise. To kind of get a feel from the community, what, the community might want to see on this property in the future. Hopefully there will be some funds available at some point in the future to accomplish the work, but for right now, the site is just gonna be grassed and used as open space, and hopefully at some point in the future, we'll have some funds to do some work.
All right, I think that's it on our end.
What about property next? House,
Repeat the question for Glenn.
So the question was, what about the properties just to the north,
To Eagle's Nest,
which is the Eagle's Nest?
so.
the house.
Yeah, so the city is going to apply, FEMA has opened up what they call BRIC. It's a national, funding program for cleaning up flood hazard and doing hazard mitigation type stuff. We are going to apply for that to, acquire that property and clean that up similar to Rocky Fork. I would say there's maybe a 50% chance we get that. Optimistic that we get it, because it's a good project, and obviously the site has a history of flooding. But it's a national program, right? So we're competing against projects all over the country. So not really. They actually combine the 2025 and 2020 or 2024 and 2025 notices of funding opportunity together. So their actually funding is a little bit larger, but they also didn't do it last year. So all the projects that we're gonna apply last year are stacked up. So there's probably gonna be twice as many projects this go around that probably gonna apply for. But from my understanding, they are trying to spread the projects out across the country, and each state is supposed to get a certain amount. So I think with that, I think we got a fairly good chance of getting it, but it's not as set in stone as the hazard mitigation funds we got for Rocky Fork, because that was a disaster declaration specifically for the Rock Creek flooding incident. And so Red Lodge was essentially top of the list for any of those funds, right? This is just different. So, but we're we're working on it, and, you know, if that doesn't pan out, you know, there may be other flooding declarations in the future where we could go after HMGP funds for that, so it'll kind of always be on the list till we get that.
Whatever is going on with the banks, is that going to be integrated with whatever use is determined for the park? Because I've heard different ideas in Pastra. One of them was like a handicap fishing access, but if it's gonna be all full of riprap, that's, I mean, I'm just wondering how you're gonna mesh those two. The future use with the bank restoration.
So the question was, are we going to mesh the bank stabilization work with any future site recreational use, basically? I guess I can't really answer that because I'm not doing the bank stabilization, so.
So the bank stabilization. So the bank stabilization is being completed to meet the FEMA requirements that were put out. And what that's going to look like is if you go down to 9th and Cooper and get a chance out to look at that. And when I say that, I want to make sure that you are looking at the west bank, not the east bank, because they are very, very different things. And I think the good news is that's the finish they are requiring, but that finishing is going to allow a lot of flexibility. So I don't think, you know, it's basically to protect that from, in fact, this is an interesting picture on the right. If you kind of look over at that pile of rocks, there's an interesting little eddy that kind of comes in there and it kind of continues to wash out. And one of their big concerns, and what we'll give you the money, but here's what you're going to do with it. And you're going to make sure that this doesn't flood again and that this doesn't contribute to additional damages. So that rock you see kind of mid-frame on the right is a little bit of the one. I've seen how you guys are having great luck with this. This right here is kind of where the water is coming in doing that. So to get to the question, we aren't going to hold off on doing the bank statement, which is a requirement, until we know what the future uses are. I think it's more the future uses will be designed to fit in with the bank with stabilization that we're required to do. But the main purpose of that is to protect this site and sites downstream. The one thing I just want to maybe emphasize a little bit also, Jeremy touched on it, and as he was looking at those bullets and about you can build certain things but not other things. That list was the things that you're allowed to apply for. If you notice, the last bullet on it was any project needs approval from FEMA and a floodplain permit. So just because it's, here's what you can consider submitting is not a guarantee that that will be approved. And since folks asked about the Eagle's Nest, yes, we are actively pursuing that. We've actually pursued three different things over the last couple of years. And when you run into a dead end, you pick up and you go for the next one. We've had conversations with private individuals. We've had conversations with government funding sources that have evaporated underneath our feet. And we're back into this again. Our application was pretty much ready to go. Jeremy and his team are helping us with those applications, and they've done a really great job. So a high level of confidence there. But one of the things I think it's valid to ask about the Eagle's Nest, because what do we do with this site? And does that change if it suddenly goes from this spot all the way through the Eagle's Nest and connects to Finn Park? Does that change the visibility of that? So as you get into the, you know, I'm trying to think what the Lincoln quote was. There's a quote about you don't tie yourself to a single path forward before all the data is available. Leave yourself contingencies and leave yourself opportunities to take into account what could be. So anyway, I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
So I think we're gonna leave this up, so you guys can keep this in mind or not. Nope, no, we're not.
Bob?
That's no. The good news is, so I'll explain the exercise. Are you guys just?
Yeah.
And I know there was one more hand over here. Did you have your question answered? Yes, sir. Okay. Yes. We walked past it last night. It is a lovely piece of property. Okay. So we could switch back, Mitch, to the green presentation.
The number two,
The number two, the break slide.
you didn't say you were gonna do that.
Are we back to the PDF one?
Yes, the PDF.
Tell me when. Oh, can't see.
That's not it.
That ain't anywhere. And we're getting somewhere.
Yes. It's probably like 5 or 6 slides up from now. No, I can just,
Yeah, you got it first.
oh, never mind, that was the end. Okay, so now we're moving on to our reuse visioning exercise. I just have a couple slides here. Okay.
Now it should, sorry.
Okay.
I had to make sure our Zoom people can see.
Great. So, on your tables, you will see, over the break appeared a very large printout of the aerial view of the Rocky Fork Insight. Unfortunately, Google doesn't, update their aerials based on what's convenient for me personally. So unfortunately, you know, the most recent aerial had, the outline area that has the building footprint. You can obviously assume that is no longer going to be there. It is a fairly flat site that starts to incline towards the creek, pretty close to that line where the rocks are. So that's the site. I will note that it is not to scale. This is all sort of a conceptual exercise. So don't feel like you need to be extremely precise with your improvements. On each table, there is an envelope that is labeled table with a table number. That's not relevant. I just wanted to make sure I had enough. In that folder, and unfortunately, none of them include money. There's a number of different improvements that are in there. They're all labeled on the back. So just have the youngest person in your group or the person with the best reading glasses. Some of them are kind of small. So just do your best there. And if you aren't sure what any of them are, raise your hand and I'll come interpret. Yeah, so there, yeah, use your envelope. There is also a little parking lot that was included on your table. It didn't fit into the envelope, so that's also included in the improvements. Yep. If there is an improvement that you would like to see at the park that is not included in that envelope, there's a pad of sticky notes on each table. Again, this is not a 2-scale exercise, so you can just write, you know, the water park on your sticky note, and we'll have that kind of be the representation of your water park, or whatever it is you'd like. There should be there's one pencil on every table if you'd like to kind of temporarily mark and erase walking paths or bike trails or whatever you want. You can use the pencil to do that, and then you can go over with a marker. And I would just, you know, add a little arrow with a label that says this is such and such an improvement. There's also a glue stick on your table. So if you will glue down all of your improvements, I would recommend that you kind of move them around and discuss. But then, you know, glue them down when you're ready. And then we'll have about 20 minutes to complete this. And then we'll have each of the tables do a quick little explanation of what they designed. Just with a quick show of hands, who is trying to go to the candidate forum? Is anyone here? Okay, we've got a couple people, but for the most part, no. Okay, so we probably will go over a little bit with the presentations, but that's okay. And those who need to can. Quickly, before everybody gets too deep into the exercise, a few things that I want to note that this exercise is not. Number 1 is graded. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You can do whatever you want. This is your community. This is owned by the city. We just want to see what you want to see on this site. It is also not a challenge to fit every improvement within the site boundary. I've done this before and people have kind of just tried to cram everything on, and if you don't want to see it there, don't put it on your page. It's also not a construction-ready design plan. Again, it's not to scale. This is all conceptual. And finally, this is not an opportunity to verbally or physically spar with your neighbors. So no fighting no punching. Okay, and with that, I'll reconvene us in about 20 minutes and I'll be floating around and answering questions. Fine,
Yeah.
so if anyone needs to leave, please feel free to do so. However, if anyone, or if people are able to stick around, to have a representative from their table, just do a quick overview of what you placed on your site, what your thought process was. We would really appreciate that. It'll be much more easy to interpret that way. Okay, yep. So I'm just gonna call up in order of who we have here. So we're gonna start with table 6. Do you remember who you are? Table 6, okay, great. Sorry, okay. Who here is from table 6? Oh.
For table 6, first of all, we reduced the amount of parking. We used we put in every tree available. And propose that we make the center point of this, the playground, and make a unique playground, probably more modern in a sense, and use natural design elements. You know, like you could put in a lot of arrows and roofs and things like that. But I think to really put some more into the design and make it, don't copy what's down at the moose trails, do something different. Is that it?
Table 3. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
So we went with trees too, we can add more, but we kind of decided to maybe hide this a little bit with the trees. And then we have the playground and we also put in a splash pad. There's lots of kids in the community and there's lots of kids that come through town. So a splash pad is just a nice place to stop and play at. We threw in some fishing access, lots of benches and picnic tables for people to sit at and some more greenery. Signage, we're doing the ice cream front, but you know. It's okay, it's like a fish. And another crosswalk, so if people need a park, they can safely cross the street.
Okay, so themes for this one are bathrooms. We were very pro bathroom. We've got native plants, kind of as a river edge feature, definitely keeping with the lots of trees and shade theme. And sort of with an eye of potentially expanding north if needed, so like this parking lot situation could morph and be integrated as we move that way. And then just, you know, walking trails to the extent that we can. Number 10.
Number 10, I have a pretty basic plan. We did not include any parking lot within the park itself because of the parking along the street. So we wanted to put a labyrinth with native plants and flowers on this end, along with a public recycling area, bins for public coming through, some flower beds. We kept the restroom close to the curb edge for bypass use. And then we put in a nature trail across the edge of the creek and a fork of it kind of over to the restroom. Big green space in the middle with the gazebo on the northwest corner and some trees to buffer the space towards Eagle's Nest. An interpretive sign out here on the end to explain what happened with the property and what's going on. And next up is number 7.
Okay, everybody, sorry about that. We certainly get votes for the most sticky notes. Anyway, we have a walking path across the, creek. We decided that since this was the north entrance into town, we really wanted it to be aesthetically pleasing. And so we have lots of greenery. We have, especially greenery along the bank here. Sorry, it's along the bank. We thought that playground would be better off in Finn Park when the city acquires that. Let's see. And we stole another table's idea that instead of a gazebo, we'd like to see a TV there. So again, this is where people come into town to first see things and we want it to be aesthetically pleasing. This is table 5.
Sorry.
I think this is very important, so I want to point it out. I think the earth should be contoured like a spillway. So if this happens or when it happens again, the water will naturally flow back toward the creek instead of going down. And this is one other thing. I think that was all I think.
Okay, we are, design number 5. We kind of thought that, this is a great opportunity to have a publicly run open air casino. Really, the things we actually talked about was that this is going to be kind of a gateway park into Red Lodge. And as you get, Flatlander tourists from Kansas, Nebraska coming in, drive down the road there after they're traumatized going over the pass. It's a good place when the families stop, let the kids get out, run around and play in the playground equipment. Like the other plans, we have a parking lot. We have a bathroom that could be moved to the other side. Eagle nest area. And playground area, pathways, that will connect Lions Park all the way down to Finn Park. And us, we think that we really should emphasize a sustainable park with native plant materials and permeable hard surfaces. That's it.
Okay, this is table 8. And one of the things we wanted to do was. Hello? Okay, the grassy area, that like elephant grass that grows naturally in the wild, kind of tufted, so that it doesn't need to be mowed. We want lots of trees, but most of all, an exploration area here, including hills and rocks in this rocky area along here. I think we should leave that. Okay, there's maybe a little bit of danger. Some kids might scrape their knees or whatever, but I think I like the idea of it being a children's area to play in, but not a structured area. We already have structured areas. So no sprinklers. We want everything here. We thought about putting in plants and flowers, but that's just a draw for the deer to come and get everything. And we wanted this to be something that did not need maintenance on a daily or regular basis, like watering or whatever. Did I miss anything?
We're gonna go off to the
Yeah, well, and the parking, our parking extends into that. We think a little bit of parking right here. And restrooms can be right up front. So as you mentioned, coming out of the pass, be nice to have public restrooms right here on your landing. And also, we want to make sure that there was a mitigated flooding area. So that the water doesn't escape the banks. But as somebody else pointed here, if I like the idea of landscaping it so that it naturally goes down back into the creek.
Anybody else?
Thank you. So we echo many of the themes since we're the next to last. We did include a playground set a little ways away from the street so that the kids and the traffic don't meet. Our parking was just 3, maybe only 2 ADA spots. Figures street parking can take the rest of it. Lots of trees, benches, picnic table, gazebo, restrooms, and as other groups have suggested, a walk that'll go all the way down to Finn Park. And we have ideas of what to do with the Eagle's Nest if and when Eagle's Nest is acquired.
Okay, table 9, we had some parking, we had restrooms, we had a TP, I think maybe that was our idea, I don't know. We liked the TP style gazebo. We had a walking trail along the creek with some benches adjacent to the water with some flowers so you don't get into the view shed. We had a connecting trail going across the bridge and along the park on the south side of that area. And we had various trees there as well. Miss anything?
Hey, I'm Max with table 2. Looks like we're also some free thinkers over here because we put it upside down. So you're just gonna have to bear with us. Yes, regarding parking, we do have the street parking provided here, so we thought like maybe a spot or 2, ADA accessible handicap spots would be good. Obviously a couple of trees, blocking sort of the noise and the vibe that you're getting from Highway 212 with some additional trees, closer to the stream for some stream restoration efforts. We were thinking, we had a couple of fun ideas. A handicap accessible, like kind of both fishing and just like somewhere people can like get some access to the water. In addition to that, instead of like a regular traditional like playground, we were thinking something like they make these like climbing boulders for kids and adults, and I think aesthetically it would look really good and would just be like a new a different kind of like structure, play structure to have in town. And then maybe our hottest take is a couple, I think, is it Helena, Lander, Wyoming, and Twin Bridges. They all like have incorporated some form of like bike camping into their public parks. And that just really increases the draw for people who like to do bike packing or bike touring. And we thought this could be a fun place to do something like that. Don't really have any specific ideas of what that would look like, but why not? And then kind of last but not least, definitely going off of like what people have said about having a trail connect to Fenton Park, but why don't we take it further? What if we had the trail go over here and then either have some sort of pedestrian bridge or like something a little more intentional going on with the existing bridge to just give people a more comfortable way over to Rotary Park and then make that a greenway? I don't know. So yeah, that's kind of what we got. Thank you.
So in our envelope, we found food truck parking, which was something that we hadn't really thought about. So we did do a parking area and overlaid food truck parking there as a way to make more use of the parking area. We put restrooms next to the parking so people had easy access, and a gazebo close, and a small play area with some benches. We also did the trail meandering along the stream with some picnic tables, interpretive signs, And then we also had in our packet, those outdoor fitness courses, where you have exercise equipment, where you can do all different, because we were going to scatter that through the park. And then, yes, like everybody else, we're going over into the Eagles Nest. And we see that having some of the parking and then a miniature golf course and a splash park.
Yeah, sure.
What is it like? Okay, well, throw this in there. Good one.
That's a good one.
All right, great. Thank you all so much for your excellent ideas. I'm loving all the various improvements that were suggested. I've never heard of a bike packing campground. I don't know what that would look like, but that sounds awesome. We'll do some research on that and see if we can find any precedent imagery. Okay, well, we are 13 minutes over, which I feel like is actually pretty good. Are there any final questions or comments that you would like to share with the group? When are we coming back with the ideas? We don't have a particular timeline. We'll probably consolidate these within the next month to 6 weeks. We'll share those with the URA and they can distribute those however they want. Yes. Yes. Sorry, yeah, I know, we just wanted to make sure everyone had time for fun design activities. It's your community, and what we had is a reflection of some of the things that we heard and did get some feedback about, not loving some of the precedent imagery. And that was something that we kind of identified on our end, and so that's something that's, nothing I proposed was set in stone, none of it is design plans, none of it is assured. It's up to you and your community to really figure out, with these materials, where do you want to take it from here? What revisions do you want to make? How do you want it to look when it's actually implemented? Yeah. Oh, yeah, we really enjoy working with Red Lodge, which is just why we're back. Any other questions?
Thank you to our presenter.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Jason's Camaro analogy never goes wrong, but I don't know anything about cars, so. All right, is there anyone from the URA who would like to say anything in closing, or? Mr. Mayor? Yes, thank you very much, Joanne, for both the space and food, the coordination. We really appreciate it. And there's lots left. Doggy bags are available, or kitty bags if you prefer. Okay, well, thank you all so much for coming. Sorry, Brent, did you want to say something? No. Okay.